I made the mother of all 808 drum kits. It is insane. It's really, really crazy. It took me so long to make, like just forever. I spent probably, at least a couple of weeks on it. And I made another new one today. I'm going to be making a few more of these analog kits because I'm making a whole bunch of rap records. And I really want to have like the best possible drum kits for these rap records, because when you are working on a rap record, you don't want to have like, if you're relying on like really extreme, like full frequency bass sounds to kind of like drive the record, then, or, you know, it's really hard for a rapper to rap. But when you spend a lot of time and care making the best drum sounds you can, then you can make really simple beats that still sound super dope and leave space for a vocalist. Okay, so all of these sounds, right, they're all velocity sensitive, or in some way they have samples that either rotate, randomize, or change with the velocity. That's pretty much the biggest thing to making them sound real. So let's talk about some of the things that I learned. So the first thing I kind of want to talk about is how to finish one of these kits. We've talked a lot about making the kits in the weekly download I did a couple weeks ago before Def 3 was on. We talked a lot about making the velocity ramps, loading them into the samplers and stuff. I got a couple little things that I learned that make it a little easier that I'll share with you, but let's just talk about leveling. So when you level your drums, like a lot of these drums are super transient-y, especially the hi-hats and stuff. Like if you go in and look at these, you can see because these sounds are real hardware sounds and they're generated by sound sources that don't play back the same every single time, you'll notice that all the transients are really uneven from each other, right? So you can see here, like the volume, it's not like a smooth gradation going up the parameter opening up. Like you can see even hits that are right next to each other, like this one, look how much louder that one is than its neighbors. Like that one's way louder than its neighbors. Same thing with this one, is like way louder than its neighbors. So a lot of the time you're going to need to clip the sounds on the way out. I sometimes use the saturator, but when it really, really counts, like on the main kick and the main snare and stuff, I almost always end up using G-clip. Yeah, this guy. So this guy won the shootout many, many times. I had shootouts on each individual channel inside this drum kit, and G-clip is almost always the winner of the best clipper. But I had some surprising other winners on some of the other channels, so we'll go over that in a minute. But one of the things that I noticed that was a real win in for getting transients is a tiny bit of bit reduction and sample rate reduction, and the Ableton drum bus. The Ableton drum bus was often a winner of the shootout when I was trying to level individual channels. So notice I'm not using the drum bus on the whole group yet. I could put a drum bus there later, but I'm using it to level this individual 808 channel. So why use a drum bus instead of G-clip in this particular instance, right? Well, first of all, I want to show you the difference the bit reduction is making, and then we can talk about that, because the bit reduction is definitely making a difference. So listen to the impact moment of the transient, like just the moment where the transient hits, and I'll do it without the redux and with. And yes, I have tried K-clip, but it's a little bit overkill sometimes. It uses a lot of processor compared to G-clip. G-clip is really clean on the processor. But yeah, you hear that transient? So there's also this like ringing in the highs that I really like, but redux, like even just putting a tiny bit of redux seems to make a difference, right? And I want you to know something else too that I learned, is that a lot of these plugins might seem like they're dry, but they're not actually dry. And redux is one of them. There is a subtle difference. But where you really hear it is when you take the bits down to 12. Right? It really just like, it brings the whole thing together. And the reason why that's happening, right, is let's get the oscilloscope. I'll show you in a sine wave. Okay, so I'll do no redux on this sine wave, and then redux. See what that's doing? Clipping the wave at the top. You can make a redux clip, but then it's also like it's turning the edges pixely, right? And these like super pixely sharp edges, they give the highs this bite, because each one of these things is kind of like a transient. Each time it goes across one of these steps, it's like a transient. Like you hear that buzz and it almost sounds like, here, I'll put the wave down. Like go all the way down. You see those clicks? Those are transients, right? This thing is adding little transients each time it takes a step. Right? So when you put it on a kick, even if it's just a touch, it really makes that first little flick of a transient hit a lot more like sharply. You get some bonus highs, and then you get a bit of bite. And if you take it down to like 12, that's usually where the threshold of where you can start hearing it. And then back the wet dry off. Like if I put it all the way wet, it's too obvious, you know, you don't really notice it that much. But if you back it off to like 10%, maybe 15. Here, I'll take the sample rate off. Yeah, but yeah, if you try it with for yourself on an 808, you'll really hear a difference. So another thing that made a surprising difference in the transient response was G-clip is normally really, really good. Right, and I'll get it out here. Oops, G-clip. G-clip is normally really good for a lot of things, but this is a clean 808 sub, right? I want it to be like a little bit distorted, but not a lot, you know? And watch what happens when you come into G-clip with a clean 808. You hear that? Bad clipping. That's not friendly clipping. That's bad clipping. Not good. Because that 808 is clean, so when that 808 hits the clipper, there's nowhere to hide those sharp edges that the clipper is making. Right? Because if you look here, let's get our... you might be able to see it a little bit. But yeah, if we look here... Alright, we got G-clip, and then we got M-oscillos. Yeah, you can see that corner. making a little corner, and that sharp corner, it kind of has a transient too. Like here, I'll take the normalize. Yeah, you can see the corner there. So those sharp edges, those corners, that's a big part of the transients. So you want that effect of like loudness and consistent volume, because if you actually look at these waves, look, these are not bricks. Like, these waves are very dynamic, right? That's what makes them sound so good when you distort them. But it also means, you know, because they're sine wavy, as you distort them, you can mess them up. So the drum bus is designed for drums, and the drum bus, it was able to get this thing loud, didn't lose a transient, and got it pretty crunchy up at the top. That little bit of crunch, especially with this redux, and that bit of sample rate reduction, that crunch really, you hear what it's doing there? But you don't want so much that it goes like bow, bow, and sounds like a distorted bass sound. We want it to be like an 808 kick. But yeah, so drum bus with the limiter, I took the compression off. I set this maximum output to -6. That's the limiter we're using, is that maximum output in the drum bus. And then a little bit of crunch. Now this decay at the bottom, this is really important. This opens up your bass even when the boom is off. Listen. You hear that? Way more bass with that decay up. You just got to get it tuned exactly. This 808, I tuned to a G when I made it. So I tuned that to exactly G. Now when you're tuning the drum bus, right, you can move this frequency thingy around like this, and it'll tell you what note you're on underneath. And when you crank up the decay and the boom, you get lots of that note. So I wanted it to be a G, but I wanted it to be like exactly a G, because I made that 808 in tune so that I could play it on the keyboard if I wanted to. So how you do that is you go to G, but you see here it always says G0 minus or G0 plus. That means you're sharp or flat. You're not exactly on G0. And you may find yourself sitting there struggling with this little thing and like hitting shift and trying to do fine increments and decrements, and it's like really hard to get exactly G0. You can hold shift and get fine control over any parameter, but it's really hard to actually get it. But what you can do, actually, I found out, is you can just double click there. Look at that, boom, it snaps the tuning. You just got to double click on the name, and I didn't know that was a feature of drum bus. So that was something that I learned when I was making these kits, and it makes a big difference. Like no decay, like where's the body? And then turn the decay up. So much fatter. And I think that the decay circuit and the crunch circuit, they interact. Then like I think the decay circuit might be in front of this crunch circuit, because watch as I bring this decay in and out, listen to the crunch. Okay, so I'll turn the crunch effect up again. So you hear it's going like boom, 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 right? And then I'll take the crunch down. So you hear that in the mids and the highs, like right up in the like 3K to the 3K to like 10K. Like you can hear the 10K on the transient, and that as I bring the crunch up, and then you can also hear this like kind of, it's like an overtone coming in around like, you know, the mids, like the upper mids. Right, you hear that? So watch what happens as you bring the decay out. Like you can still hear that crunch, but it like, the body of this is really fitting nice with the highs from this. Like you can tell they're kind of designed as a team when you hit them together. Like just the crunch is okay on its own. Just the decay is okay on its own, but when you get them together, it really sounds nice. Lots of love. Thanks for watching, everybody. Big up to each and every one of you. Thanks for supporting Producer Dojo. Happy drum transient making with your kits. If you are in the class of 808 or you have the Ill Methodology Complete Collection, you can look forward to lots more kits. I'm going to see if I can recover the one that crashed right before the lesson. That's a bit of a bummer. I had a whole new one. But whatever. I will rebuild it. I will make it better. Like the $1 million man, Steve Austin.
Step in my dojo, you. Step in my dojo, you. Step in my